Hey, Pastor Paul here. Take a few minutes just to consider a few topics with me today. We're going to look at the craziness at OpenAI and their founder, Sam Altman. We're going to start to talk about the Israel-Hamas War, a little bit of the history on that. We're going to talk about the new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, and why that's important. And I've got a good book to share with you, so let's go ahead and get started. Well, welcome to Consider This with Pastor Paul Trimble. This is a podcast for those that call themselves Christians like me, just to consider the events, the issues of our day, and how we should think about those things as Christians. But it's also for those that don't consider themselves Christians, but want to understand why Christians believe what they believe and why they do what they do. Well, the next thing I want us to consider on the list is something that is very good, I think, and that is the new Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, Mike Johnson. Mike Johnson is a Republican representative from the great state of Louisiana. I might add that they have the best food of any state, in my opinion, including my home state of Texas. I love Cajun food. He currently serves in the U.S. House of Representatives. He was born in 1972 in Shreveport, Louisiana, a very conservative area of the country, politically speaking. Before entering politics, Johnson had a successful career as this constitutional law attorney, specializing in religious liberty cases. Now, that's important because of what he's going to do. Not many in Congress have that pedigree. In 2016, Johnson won his first election for public office and has been representing Louisiana's 4th Congressional District since 2017. And he's been reelected in subsequent elections. Johnson has been an active member of Congress. He really works hard for his constituents. He serves on various committees, including, I believe, the House Judiciary Committee, the House Natural Resources Committee. He also has been a member of the Republican Study Committee, which is kind of an inside committee to look at issues that are coming up before Congress. So Johnson is known for his conservative views, and he's been a vocal guy on issues such as religious freedom, really pro-life policies, and limited government. And he has actively supported the Republican Party's agenda and has been a long and strong advocate for his constituents in Louisiana. So Speaker Johnson appears to be a great pick for the speaker position. Speaker Johnson appears to be this great pick. So let's consider why that is, and let's think about this. Speaker Johnson did something amazing, and that is he kept the government open. You'll see the Republican Party has been split really down the center. Republicans and Democrats always fight. It's kind of their job to look at their constituents, argue out, compromise, get things done. But inside the Republican Party, since the Trump presidency, since the end of the Trump presidency, what has happened is that there's two wings of the Republican Party, the more right wing versus the more left wing of the Republican Party. Some would say the left wing is more moderate. Some would say the right wing is extreme. Neither one are exactly good monikers that we can use. But here's been the problem, is the House of Representatives has such a narrow margin within the House. The Democrats control the Senate, which is usually interesting because the Republicans usually control the Senate. But where finance bills, things like that to fund the government start and are really begin in the House of Representatives. And so what's happened is that these two parts of the Republican Party have been at war with each other. The right of that The right side of that is really talking about making sure that we can pay for everything that we pass as far as the government. Since I've been a kid, the government has been borrowing large sums of money, and especially in the Obama and in the Trump administration, and now in the Biden administration, we have been borrowing large sums of money to pay for these massive budgets. So this right side of the party has been really trying to make sure we cut government down to size so that what we can afford. The other side of the party, the one that's not as conservative, they're concerned about that too, but what they want to make sure and do is make sure to keep the government open, that we don't have a government shutdown. If you've been looking at politics very long, we've had many times where we've shut the government down, where Congress is usually butting heads on this, but it's usually Republicans against Democrats. Right now, it has been Republican against Republican. So here's how Speaker Johnson really comes into play. No one really saw him coming except the people inside the party. He was not nationally known, but he has come in and made the trains run on time. Here's what we mean by that. He's making sure things actually get done. And the first thing was to pass this. I believe it's a continuing resolution to keep the government open. I may be using the wrong term on that, but essentially a stopgap measure, like a temporary budget that the Congress can use, then the government can use to stay open. They had one for 45 days before this, but now this is one that lasts just after the first of the year. Now, here's what I'm hoping that will happen. This is what Speaker Johnson is wanting to have happen. A little bit of a history lesson. Each year, the Congress is supposed to pass these budgets, 12 separate budgets. And up until 1979, they would do that. So each area of the government, picture, they would pass a different budget for each area. That way, each area of the government, we knew what they were spending. But starting in 1979, 1980 timeframe up until today, they began passing one budget called an omnibus budget, where they take all 12 of those things, put it together into one budget, this massive budget. The problem with that, in my opinion, is no one really knows what's in that budget. No one person knows, and I'm talking Congress. And so they pass this budget, and then we find out what's in it. And there's tons of what we call pork barrel. That's just an old-timey way to talk about things that are in the budget we don't really need. So Speaker Johnson is looking at that and saying, we need to go back to the old system of passing these 12 separate budgets and really looking at what we spend money on. Now, this is something that Democrats do not want. They don't want to go back to that. Many of the Republicans don't want to, but I think for fiscal responsibility, this is going to be a great thing. We're going to keep our eye on the speaker and see how he's doing. He's holding on to power right now. Let's be honest, it's like trying to herd cats, and that's just inside his own party. But I think he's going to be a great guy. He's a believer. He's a Christian. And we're going to keep our eye on him. Let's be praying for Speaker Johnson here. Well, let's talk about the craziness at OpenAI and their founder, Sam Altman. OpenAI, who brought that ChatGPT to us last year around this same time, has been this amazing technology guy. He and the software OpenAI has been bound up in controversy. You've heard about AI, and that is at the center of that controversy is Sam Altman. Sam Altman is a prominent figure in the tech industry. He's an entrepreneurial guy, an investor, one of the world's most really prestigious startup accelerators. He's born in 1985. He's a relatively young guy. Altman founded his first company, get this, Looped, Loopt, Looped. It was a location-based social networking app when he was only 19 years old. So he's clearly like this genius computer guy. Altman is known for his really insightful thoughts on technology, startups, and the future of artificial intelligence. Now, we're not talking about artificial intelligence today. We will soon, because there's some great things, there's some really scary things about AI, artificial intelligence. But why are we talking about him? Let's consider what we should think about with Sam Altman. Well, last week, about this time, he was called in. I actually think it's Thursday or Friday. He was called in by his board. He was the president or the chief operating officer of Open AI, which is the company that brought you ChatGPT. It is set up as a nonprofit, but has a for-profit wing. And for all you that don't like business stuff, I hope that you'll learn to like it a little bit because it's how we spend our money. But OpenAI, because of ChatGPT and a host of other things, has really done well this last year with artificial intelligence. And his board brought him in Friday and essentially fired him. The board is not very big. I want to say there's 3, 4, 5 members like that. But that started some real turmoil inside this company, OpenAI. And then Saturday and Sunday, I believe they met all day Sunday he tried to get his job back. Essentially, they walked him out. Now, why this is so important is because then on Sunday night, Monday morning, we're not sure exactly when, Microsoft, the giant corporation started by Bill Gates, hired him, and he's going to go to work for them. Some of the board is pretty upset. Some of the board of OpenAI is pretty upset with that. So we're going to keep an eye on this. The reason why this is so important is I believe there's about 700, 800, almost 800 employees at OpenAI. From what I read, about 750 to 770 of their people, their main people that work on this software company, has said they're going to leave because Sam Altman has been fired. Now that's really important. So the last thing that I saw is OpenAI wasn't doing very well there. Initially, why this is intertwined with Microsoft is that Microsoft was one of the main investors in OpenAI. They're not a controlling member. In other words, they don't have the amount of stock that you would need to say this is what the board should do or not do or who to fire. But they had significant under 50% ownership in the company. By the way, with that, there were some other people that have really invested in that heavily. We're talking like billions and billions of dollars have been invested by Microsoft alone. So initially, when OpenAI made this decision on Sunday night, their stock took a dip overnight. But then when people saw that they hired Sam Altman, their stock has been shooting up. The last thing that I saw was shooting up. By the way, this is not any kind of a podcast. I'm telling you what you should do with your money on that, but just an interesting thing. We'll keep our eye on Sam Altman and what all of those key software developers and computer scientists guys, what they're going to do at Microsoft. To me, it looks like Microsoft is going to be in the driver's seat now, and maybe OpenAI made a fatal mistake. We'll see how that works. We'll talk more about that in the future. The next thing, let's open up something that's fairly big, and that's the Israeli-Hamas war. Let's talk about that Israel-Hamas conflict in a this complex and long-standing problem. Many of you know it. What I found is when I was talking to people about this, they were not understanding the history. There's lots of incorrect history. So let's take a look a little bit at the history. This isn't all of it for sure, but let's consider this. We'll start with God giving the area of land that we call Palestine to the Hebrew people through Abraham and ultimately Moses and the Jewish people. We'll save all of that for another time. I've preached on that. You can listen to those things and we'll talk about that. I have some strong opinions and I know a lot of that history like the back of my hand. But let's talk about the modern conflict and how it can be traced back to really the late 19th century and early 20th centuries when Jewish and Arab nationalist movements emerged in the region that we know as Palestine, which was under the control of the Ottoman Empire. Yes, the Ottoman Empire back then. In the late 19th century, at the end of the Ottoman Empire, a movement called Zionism began to emerge with the aim of establishing a Jewish homeland in Palestine. Now, something that you may not understand is, to begin with, that Zionist movement, Zionism, was not the religious side of Judaism. It really had nothing to do with the religion of being a Jew. And so in the 1880s and 1890s, they were crucial years for the development of Zionism. And here's what we mean by that. After World War I, the League of Nations granted Britain a mandate to really administer Palestine, the whole area, with the goal of establishing a national home for the Jewish people. Now, something you need to understand is sometimes people like to say the Jewish people had left and were coming back. There were Jewish people in this Holy Land or Palestine. They've been there since the times of Moses. There's always been some there. It got a lot fewer, but in the 20th century, through Zionism, it came on. So it's not like they had never been there or had gone away. There had always been Jewish people. But tensions between the Jewish people and the Arab communities grew as Jewish immigration began to increase. That was driven by factors such as persecution of Jews in Europe and the Zionist movement advocating for Jewish people to actively move to the homeland. Now, this is really true from the 1880s, early 20th century, 1900, and then in the late 1930s, it accelerates because violent clashes began to erupt between those two groups. Now, Arabs have also been in that area as well, but they really came in to that area with the Ottoman Empire and ran a lot of Jewish folks out, a lot of Christians out. And so that's where that Arab part came from. By the way, there are, I believe, 26, 27, depending on how you count it, 27, maybe even 28, you could make an argument, Arab countries in the world. There is one Jewish state, and that's Israel, which is interesting. This is going to play an important part because following World War II and because of the Holocaust, where 6 million Jews had been killed by the Third Reich and Hitler and his minions, there was international sympathy for the establishment of a Jewish state. And you can understand that. That led to the United Nations proposing a partitioning plan in 1947. This is just after World War II. Now, the plan was accepted by the Jewish leaders, but rejected by the Arab leaders. And what that meant is that a war started in 1948 called the Arab-Israeli War. You've got to understand, Israel sits where it sits. It's surrounded by its enemies all the way around. So that conflict And every subsequent conflict or war since that time, the Jews have started none of those. The Arabs, sometimes all of them in the case of 1948 and 1967, but they started it. And every time the Arabs start a conflict or a full-blown war like we have right now, the Palestinians lost ground and Israel expanded. So make sure that you're getting this. Israel has expanded each time because they have been attacked. Now, we'll talk about this more in the future, but I think that that is something, well, let's just say supernatural. And we'll look at how that connects to end time prophecy, possibly. Well, like we said, Israel declared independence in 1948, leading to a series of wars and conflicts with their neighboring Arab countries. Now, during that 1967 Six-Day War, Israel occupied what we call the West Bank. If you're looking at a map, it's that part on the right side of Israel, and the Gaza Strip and East Jerusalem, which became the focus of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Just a word on terms here. This might help. The word Palestine really started when the Roman armies came in and conquered Israel. Why that's important is the Palestinian word is a Roman word. There technically there's not a people called the Palestinian people as another race. Palestinian or the Palestinian people are really Arabs that are in Palestine. That's why we call them the Palestinian people or the Palestinian conflict. Now, the reason that's important is many times people will like to say the Palestinians are a separate race. Remember when I said that the Arab world had 26, 27, 28 Arab countries and only one Israeli or Jewish country there. So that's why that's important to understand the terms where they came from. In the late 1980s, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, or what we used to call the PLO, you don't hear of them very much, its leader, Yasser Arafat, sought reconciliation and really self-determination from the Palestinians. Now, remember, they were under Israeli control because of these wars. Let me go backwards for just a second. When we talk about that 1967 war, it was a six-day war. Why that is so important is one of the words or one of the phrases Jewish people refer to that war as is the war of creation, because it's that war when everyone ganged up on Israel once again and did a surprise attack. And Israel miraculously not only repelled the attack, but gained most of its territory. And that's why that's important there. There was another major conflict in 1973 along the same lines. Again, the Jewish people didn't start any of those conflicts. The Arab world started all of those. So, and again, every time the Arabs started something, the Jewish people really expanded because they just beat the Arab people at their own game. But in the late 1980s, this Palestinian Liberation Organization wanted self-determination. They were under Israeli occupation at that because of the war. So the PLO engaged in negotiations with Israel, and that had happened several times, but that resulted in the Oslo Accords in 1983. Oslo simply meaning the city where they were negotiated in Oslo, Norway. That was in 1983 under Bill Clinton, which I'm no fan of Bill Clinton, but that was a great thing that he did. It did not work the way they thought that it would work, but it established the Palestinian Authority and then limited self-rule in certain areas. However, the peace process faced numerous challenges, including the rise of Hamas. Hamas formed in 1987. you need to know the word Hamas in the Old Testament and why they chose that name literally means violence in there. Hamas is a terrorist organization with very close ties to ISIS, Iran, as well as other terrorist organizations. So, Palestinian political and military organization, uh, this Hamas, rejects Israel's right to exist and advocates armed resistance. They want to destroy Israel. And let me be clear, you've heard this term from the river to the sea. That's talking about the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. When you hear that term, it is a term that means the wiping out, the ethnic cleansing of the Jewish people and the Jewish state. Now, this is interesting and why this is important, because not only is Israel the United States' closest ally, especially in that region, I would argue overall, but they're also um, the only nation there with democratic ideals. They have actually, people have a right to vote there, not just Jewish people, but Palestinian people that live in Israel get to vote, as well as other Arab people. There's nothing that says, hey, because you're a certain race, you can't vote. So when someone tells you that Israel is some colonial empire, that is completely incorrect. Now we'll explore this more in the future, but the reason Hamas gained popularity was through social welfare programs, and they won the Palestinian legislative elections back in 2006. Since then, there have not been any elections that have gone on. They've just held on to their power by violence. They split with the other party called it's Mahmoud Abbas, the Fatah party, which controls the West Bank. So those are two different things. We're talking about Gaza. Since then, the conflict between Israel and Hamas has been characterized by periods of, well, I'd say relative calm and intermittent escalations of violence. And it always, always, always starts with Hamas sending rockets into Israel that attack all of Israel. Now, this rocket attacks by Hamas into Israel and the Israeli military has at times gone into Gaza. Now, obviously, lately they've gone in, but they would go in. So when you hear that Israel has been an occupier force of Gaza, that is absolutely not true. They have not been there since 2005, except for going in, eliminating the rockets, things like that, and then coming back out. We've seen huge casualties on both sides, but in Israel, where Hamas has sent these rockets. Well, October 7th of this year, Hamas terrorists attacked Israel, killing 1,400 plus people and wounding many others. So, all of that history, what am I getting at? What do we do about this? As Christians, how do we think about this? What can we do? How can we pray? Well, let's think about this. Let's consider it. First of all, as Christians, we know that in the Bible, that God has given them the land, given the Hebrew people the land. It is theirs from God. We can try to split that up like the United Nations and things like that, but they've been given the land. We could even be against God. We could say, no, we should think this should be the Palestinians, get the Jews out of there. At the end of the day, I don't think that's going to have a lot of impact. So how should we think of this? We should be praying, one, that the war ends soon, that Hamas is defeated, that innocent people on both sides are taken care of, and that deaths are kept to a minimum. Here's the thing that I think is important for us to pray for, There are Christians in both sides of this conflict. There are Christians not in Hamas, but in the Gaza Strip in there. And as Israel has gone in, we'll talk about this more and keep us up to date on this. I wanted to just hit some of the history of this. We need to be praying that God uses all of this to bring people to repentance and that they will turn to him en masse, including the Jewish nation. There are not many Christians in Israel. It is mainly a country that is just doesn't believe in God. They don't follow the parts of the Old Testament. Now, there are parts of the Jewish nation that are very religious on this. We'll talk about this more on the side of how do we, as things go forward. What we're praying for right now is we're praying for innocent people to be protected. We're praying for the Jewish soldiers that are going in. One thing I want to say before we get off this topic is there's something very quickly that the Palestinians could do and Hamas could do that could save thousands of lives. And that is simply this. By the way, no one's talking about this on the news, is they could surrender. If you'll notice, as Israel has gone in, the Hamas terrorists continue to shoot rockets every day into Israel. They are fighting house to house. They are using human shields. And their goal is to get as many Palestinians wounded or killed as possible so that plays well to their supporters in the Arab world. Now, something that we're concerned with is there's been a huge increase in anti-Semitism. You've seen this even in our country on college campuses, in our nation's capital, in London, in Paris, France. We're going to explore that topic and why that's the case. I think that's supernatural on this. But we need to be praying for these guys that the hostages will be released. We pray that Hamas lays down their arms so that the fighting stops, so that the bombing stops. That would stop the bombing almost instantly if Hamas would simply surrender. Israel would take over. People would have food. One other thing, and I keep saying one other thing, but there's just so many facets to this. When the news has said Israel won't let people out of the country, that's only partially true. The other side is a big part of the border with Gaza is controlled by Egypt. Notice that Egypt and nearby Jordan, the country of Jordan, they don't want the Palestinians. And so they don't want them to become refugees. They don't want them to come in. So they're not letting them out either. So it's not just on Israel. Well, let's be praying for those guys. That's some heavy stuff, and I know I talked a lot about it. We'll talk tons more about it in the future as those things develop, and especially how that relates to end-time prophecy. Let's do book review time. Let me tell you about a good book that I think every Christian parent should read. And I mean that every Christian parent, and not just every parent. I would say grandparents, every Christian. Let's say it that way. This is this one is kind of urgent that you need to go ahead and purchase this and read it. You can get it from Amazon. You can get it from Christian book distributors. You can get it from Audible. And the reason I want you to read this, because it tackles so many of the issues of our day that Christians are facing. It comes from Rosaria Butterfield. I know it's a different sounding name, Rosaria Butterfield. She is a Christian author who has written several great books that I've just enjoyed personally. If you don't know, I read a lot of books, and so I'm going to give you a lot of books to listen to. This one is probably the top book of this year. 5 Lies of Our Anti-Christian Age. 5 Lies of Our Anti-Christian Age by Rosaria Butterfield. It's a thought-provoking and really insightful book. that begins to challenge this prevalent misconception or a set of misconceptions and falsehoods about Christianity in today's society. Butterfield is a former tenured professor of English and women's studies at Syracuse University. She's highly educated. She brings a unique perspective as someone who was once a vocal opponent of Christianity herself. She was an atheist. It's in this new book, though, Butterfield identifies and dismantles these 5 lies that she believes, and I believe too, are perverse, that we need to look at. And these are lies that are everywhere in our anti-Christian age. First, she addresses the lie that biblical Christianity is oppressive and harmful, and arguing that true Christianity really actually brings freedom and transformation to individuals and communities. Second, Butterfield tackles the lie that Christians are hateful and intolerant, emphasizing the importance of love and compassion as central tenets of the Christian faith. She encourages Christians to engage in thoughtful and respectful dialogue with those that hold differing beliefs. And then the third lie that she addresses is the belief that sexuality defines a person's identity. Butterfield challenges this notion of asserting that our true identity she asserts that our true identity is found in Christ, not in our sexual orientation or our desires. She presents a biblical perspective on human sexuality, urging Christians to approach this topic with both grace but also truth, which is often missing. Next, Butterfield addresses the lie that gender is a social construct and that individuals can choose their own gender. I know this is a hot topic for us. This is why I really want you to look at this. She presents a biblically grounded view on gender, emphasizing the importance of embracing our God-given identity as both male and female followers or those made in the image of God. Finally, Butterfield confronts the lie that science and Christianity are incompatible. She draws from her background in academia. She demonstrates how faith and science really can coexist. She offers a compelling case for the compatibility of Christianity and the scientific inquiry. Overall, the 5 lies of our anti-Christian age offers really a well-reasoned and balanced perspective on important cultural issues. This book serves as a valuable resource for Christians seeking to engage with the culture around them and respond to common, really misconceptions about their faith. I love this book. I give this 2 thumbs up, the highest rating I can give this. Now, who should read this? I'm saying all Christians, non-Christians. For you guys, I think it would be a great book for you too, because it would help you understand the reasoning where we stand on, especially these 5 issues, but others as well. How young could someone read this? I think someone in high school and above is certainly there. I think it would be great if parents read it with their high school students. In some cases, I think junior high, this would also be good. And this is why, because this is where the culture wars are starting to engage our children, is especially in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Now I'm going to say something controversial. There could be some cases, parents, you are the best ones to think through this, but as a pastor, as a father, I would have had my maybe my 4th and 5th grader listen to this when they were that age. Now they're grown-ups now, but well, consider that. Next time on Consider This, we'll talk about big box stores closing and what that means in big key cities across the U.S. And crime. We'll consider George Santos' the New York representative in Congress that looks like he's about to lose his job. We'll talk about what we're thankful for. We'll talk about that Christmas season and what we're doing there, what to be thinking about. We'll talk about other things that are in the news and maybe take on some more stuff with Israel. And I'll have another good book for you to consider. Well, thanks again for joining me. If you would like if you like what I'm doing here, subscribe and like this podcast and share it with your friends. I'm going to do my best to get better at this. And if you would like to ask me any questions or any topics you want me to consider, send them to me at my email, pastorpaultrimble@gmail.com. pastorpaultrimble@gmail.com. To catch my current sermon series or even older series, search Bent Tree Church on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts, or you can visit benttreechurch.com. Even better yet, if you live in northern Colorado area, come and visit Bent Tree in person at either one of our services, 9 and 11 a.m. I would love to meet you then. Well, blessings. I hope that you'll join me next time on Consider This with Pastor Paul Trimble.